Dr. Fell? Chief Inspector Rinaldo Pazio di quest'ora.
Hello to our very, very small fan base. We are the Movie Meisters. I am Kenneth.
And I'm Matt.
And we just saw the movie Hannibal. Matt, what is Hannibal about?
Hannibal is about the further adventures of Hannibal Lecter after he mysteriously escapes into the wide, wide world. And a police detective has the opportunity of catching him in Italy, but that is a horrible, horrible mistake. Clarice, of course, returns to try to stop this guy and to stop Hannibal.
Someday you'll thank me, or you won't. I don't care. You'll be alive. Inspector Pazzi?
Is this Clarice? Well, hello, Clarice.
So we've reviewed Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs at this point. We've done a trilogy so far, so what do you think?
I thought it was very good. Hannibal pulling off the most artistic murder of all time, basically.
Yes.
Kind of incredible how utterly appropriate every element of killing the police inspector is to every other aspect of the plot. He kind of has it all planned out in a very clever way, and it's weirdly delightful to watch him.
Yes. Yeah, totally. At least with the first three films, this is kind of the black sheep. But every time I see it, there are more things that I like about it. Going to the murders, it seems like this is Hannibal unleashed back in Silence of the Lambs to escape. It's very crude initially. He just goes to bite the guy and beats the other guy to death with his nightstick. Here, he has more time to come up with an elaborate plan, quote marks, dispensing justice. It's very, very strange, because in this movie, we are sort of made to sympathize with Hannibal, because what he's doing to these people, it feels like these people deserve it. It's established very early on by the character Barney, who was in all of the other previous movies, that Hannibal prefers to eat the rude. Much of this movie is about dispensing justice to the people who mistreat Clarice. It's a very unique perspective.
Avarice, hanging, self-destruction. Io fece, io bettame, le mie case. I make my own home, be my gallows.
The first two movies are essentially just police procedurals. The Red Dragon story and Silence of the Lambs, they're pretty much the same story, but with differing importance in the characters. This one is a complete deviation from that formula. It's largely about the characterization of Pazzi, Hannibal, and Clarice. I love the parallels drawn between Clarice and Pazzi, which I didn't pick up on very much before. They're both disgraced, but they're disgraced for completely different reasons. Because of the difference in their characters, Pazzi decides to go the more corrupt route in capturing Hannibal, and Clarice goes by the book. We see an interesting parallel there.
Yeah, and that ties into sympathizing with Hannibal because he paints this aesthetic picture about why Pazzi deserves this and his family deserves this, and the greed of Judas, constructing this murder in a way to make it seem like he's doing the correct thing aesthetically.
It's your ancestor, Commendatore, hanging beneath these very windows.
I think it does a good job of making Hannibal seem very clever while not making him seem omniscient, because he does mess up a couple of times in this movie.
Sure, yeah.
With Pazzi, he makes a pickpocket that gets sent after him, but even though he kills the pickpocket, he falls for the trap, which is to leave a fingerprint behind.
Yeah, and he also gets caught by Verger's men when he's trying to have a discussion with Clarice over the phone.
Yeah, and I really like that because I didn't notice this the first time I watched, but that's foreshadowing for what happens at the very end of the movie. Putting himself in an awkward situation where he gets caught because he has this obsession with Clarice. He, for some reason, needs to be on that carousel so he can be next to her.
Now that's really interesting.
So it's kind of great. We got two legends of the silver screen here. We've got Anthony Hopkins and we've got Gary Oldman playing Mason Verger. And he has this great line to Verger where Verger is, of course, this guy that Hannibal convinced to cut off his face. And Verger says, "I bet you wish you fed the rest of me to the dogs." And then Hannibal says, "No, Mason, I like you just the way you are." It's so good.
Dinner at 8.
This movie is simultaneously more over the top than Silence of the Lambs, but there are a lot of moments of just as much subtlety. That scene at the opera, Potsy goes there with his wife, and he's not really interested in going, but she really wants to go. There's this great moment where he knows that he's being watched, and then he has this sudden look of, oh, you're bothering me while I'm at this opera. And he turns around, and he's looking right at Potsy. It's such a great, subtle moment. There's a lot going on there. Where the scene immediately after, he has this discussion with Senora Potsy, and he's sort of talking about Clarice.
He woke her then, and trembling and obedient, she ate that burning heart out of his hand. Weeping, I saw him then depart from me.
Dr. Feld, do you believe a man could become so obsessed with a woman from a single encounter?
Could he daily feel a stab of hunger for her and find nourishment in the very sight of her? I think so. Or would she see through the bars of his plight and ache for him?
And then later on it's revealed that the reason for his infatuation is because she is so incorruptible. Yeah, the thing about this movie, I want to say it gets unfairly bashed largely because of the comparison to Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs, while there's a lot of extreme things that happen, by the end of this movie, things get really over the top with him feeding Ray Liotta his own brain. I think that's largely where the criticism comes in, is that scene.
That smells great. Yes. Let's try that base.
I would really like some pie.
It is good.
I think there is kind of a disconnect there because with the verger and him, it seems like part of Hannibal's shtick is getting them to consent to their own death or mutilation. But with Potsy, it's so much more sophisticated and complicated. Yeah. The other things don't live up to that. It's so much about what Hannibal believes. But these other ones, it's just like the irony of, oh, you probably didn't want to cut your own face off, but I made you do that with like drugs and stuff.
That's true, yeah.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
I don't know, would you agree with the statement that the first half of the movie, the part that takes place in Florence, is the better half?
Yeah.
We understand every character's motivation very well. Inspector Potsy is this disgraced inspector because of his ancestry, and there's this idea that people keep him from advancing in life largely because of his name. He wants to provide for his wife. That's his motivation for turning Hannibal into Mason Verger instead of to the proper authorities. It's very complex, but you understand every element of it, and you also understand why Hannibal looks down on him. He's not a person of class, and he's dispensing his own brand of justice. I really, really like that, and the way it's filmed.
Is that the inventory?
Yes,
May I see it?
of course.
Oh, yeah, there's a lovely scene where he's first trying to get the fingerprint by visiting Hannibal. And there's this long, awkward silence and shot where he's trying to get Hannibal to put a fingerprint on something. He's just not doing it. He knows exactly what's going on. Even at that early point, it feels like, get out of there, man. There's
Right.
no way this ends well for you.
Yeah, that's part of the fun too, is in that half of the movie, every scene from that point on is like you're just digging the hole deeper for yourself.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if this movie would have been better by dragging out the Potsy thing to be the bulk of the movie and then just having Verger and Clarice be like the little angel and devil on his shoulder, you know, trying to get him to do this or that, which they kind of are.
Yeah.
But then his plot stops, and then Verger becomes the antagonist for the end of the movie, and it's all about the relationship between Hannibal and Clarice and bringing a kind of closure to that.
That part of the movie is clearly the lesser part, but I do like what they did with Clarice's character. It almost seems like a natural progression from her character in Silence of the Lambs. She starts off as this out-of-her-depth trainee, Because of her experiences with Hannibal in the dungeon, she grows to be this competent FBI agent who's only screwed over because of the corruption of her superiors.
So I take it you've seen the coverage in the papers and on television?
I have nothing to do with the news, Mr. Prenner.
The woman had a baby in her arms. There are pictures. You could see the problem, I would think.
Not in her arms. In a carrier across her chest. In her arms, she had a MAC-10.
Look, we're here to help you, Sterling. It's gonna be a hell of a lot harder to do with a combative attitude.
And Hannibal knows about this. It's also the very same element that attracts him to her. That's a neat aspect to the movie for me, that she stays this incorruptible person despite Hannibal pointing out that her idea of right and wrong isn't necessarily the right one.
Yeah, it's kind of ambiguous at the end, too. You could almost take it as she changes him because he makes a selfless decision. But
Yeah.
then again, the final scene is almost like saying, well, not really. This is just kind of his modus operandi all along. And she's just understanding that well enough to force him into a situation, right? And it's not like he's becoming good or something. He did what the logic of his character dictated that he had to do. Clarice grows as a character between the movies, but he kind of doesn't.
Given the chance, you would deny me my life, wouldn't you?
Not your life.
My freedom, just that. You take that from me. And if you did, would they have you back, do you think? The FBI? Those people you despise almost as much as they despise you? Would they give you a medal, Clarice, do you think? Would you have it professionally framed and hang it on your wall to look at and remind you of your courage and incorruptibility? All you would need for that, Clarice, is a mirror.
Yeah, the book is very, very different because there, I want to say Hannibal's motivations for being infatuated with her were more general. In this, it's very clear. He's in love with her because of her incorruptibility. In the book, it's just he wants to convince her that there's more to the black and white moral element, and then ultimately she sees things from his perspective. I don't think it would have been as accepted if they did the ending from the book, because we have this perception of Clarice from Silence of the Lambs, and ultimately that's the reason Jodie Foster decided not to come back. She thought that they were going to do the ending from the book, and she didn't agree with it. This movie sort of has Alien 3 syndrome, where the production was just a mess because they didn't know what actors they were going to have, they didn't know what direction to take the ending, but then it ended up still being a competently made movie. I think the big ones in question were Jodie Foster, Jonathan Demme, who directed Silence of the Lambs, and Ted Talley, who wrote The Silence of the Lambs, and Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal, and ultimately they only got one back.
Do right and live through this.
Spoken like a true Protestant.
Oh yeah, by the way, Jonathan Demme just passed away, so, rest in peace, Jonathan Demme. Made some great movies, especially Silence of the Lambs.
Isn't it funny?
What's that?
You can look at my face, but you shied when I said the name of God.
What'd you think of Mason Verger as our antagonist? I always praise Gary Oldman and everything he's in, largely because every character he plays is so different from every other character he plays. Yes, he's written as a very reprehensible character. He doesn't have the money to buy a senator, but he has the money to rent him from time to time. And at the same time, we hate him because he's a child molester. I don't know. What'd you think of his sort of cat and mouse with Hannibal?
He was well acted, but maybe a little underwritten. I think there's no hook for us to be interested. Whenever there's an exchange with someone, he's the butt of it.
Yeah, that's true. There are really no redeeming aspects to his character. Every other character, you can point a good thing and a bad thing about them. Even Clarice, you can almost say that she's naive for believing in the oath that she took. But with Mason, he is just a straight-up evil character.
You serve the idea of order, Clarice. They don't. You believe in the oath you took. They don't. You feel it is your duty to protect the sheep. They don't.
Right, so have the lambs stopped screaming? Is there a definitive resolution to that character arc from Silence of the Lambs?
Well, I remember from Silence of the Lambs, she saves Catherine Martin, and in Clarice's mind, that's her way of silencing the lambs.
Right, so he's telling her she wants advancement, she wants this and that, so she gets the advancement.
Right.
So his prediction came true, that working with him would cause this to happen. But looking at Clarice now, this new role as the advanced FBI agent, is she psychologically settled now? That a final little joke of Hannibal is well, those lambs are never going woman stop screaming.
See, that's what I was thinking. It's like with a typical character arc for this would be you came to this resolution now, but you know those lambs will start screaming again, and then you're going to go after another person, or you're going to try to save another person. I want to say from a character standpoint, the lambs have stopped screaming, but there's just a completely new conflict for her. She was fighting the serial killers before. Now she's fighting her own people. Her real enemy is not Hannibal. Her real enemy is Ray Liotta. Paul Krenler. I finally say the character's name correctly.
So I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of the lamb scream is she has nothing to do with the lambs, right? She's just there because she doesn't have anywhere else to go. But
Right.
somehow she feels personally responsible to like save one of the lambs.
Yes.
And at the beginning of this movie, she doesn't believe she's responsible for the FBI raid going bad, but she does feel responsible that she got herself in a situation where she had to shoot a mother, even though there were extenuating circumstances, right? And then with Potsy, she's primarily concerned with him not getting himself killed, rather than how he can help her catch Hannibal. She does just keep taking on new projects, like just that are analogous to the lamb. There's this thing, and this person could have been saved, and it's like my fault. And so I think the answer is no.
I can totally see that. I would say if you're a fan of the stories of Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs, this is a good follow-up, and I would say even to a degree conclusion to those storylines.
It's good. It takes the whole serial killer thing in a different direction.
It's an interesting thing to sympathize with the serial killer, because we don't sympathize with Hannibal in Silence of the Lambs, at least not to the same degree. I mean, we want him to get away from Dr. Chilton because he mistreats him, but he is also the one who's in control. He's the one preventing the FBI from catching Buffalo Bill, but in this case, we almost want to see him dispense his own brand of justice against these corrupt individuals. This plays with our expectations a little bit. It feels like a natural progression from the previous stories, at least on the part of Hannibal and Clarice. So, yes, I would recommend this film as well. So, yeah, those are our thoughts on the movie Hannibal. We are the Movie Meisters saying,
cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake.
Thanks for watching.
Tell me, Clarice, would you ever say to me, stop? If you loved me, you'd stop.
Not in 1,000 years.
Not in 1,000 years. That's my girl.